braids of blood, shaved scalps carved with runes. What if every twist of hair whispered a secret of power, vengeance, and death? The mist hangs low over a silent fjord, thick and unmoving, as if even the air itself dares not speak. A lone figure crouches by a cauldron, the fire beneath it crackling with more than heat, something older, more sacred. Ash and oil swirl into a black brew. Their hands dip into it with reverence, with purpose. Above, the sky holds its breath. Steam rises like ghost smoke. The water reflects flickering firelight, broken and dancing. In the distance, a chant hums, a sound that is not quite music, not quite memory. It grows from the earth, from the bones buried beneath it. A hand reaches into the firelight. It holds a carved wooden comb, smooth from use and darkened with time. Slowly, the comb glides through long, sun-bleached hair. Each pass reveals more than strands, it reveals runes etched, not just on skin, but in intention. The teeth of the comb part the hair like a priest reading scripture. The light catches the gold of the hair, the amber of the comb, the silence of the room. This is not vanity. This is preparation. This is ritual. Hair becomes a canvas, a symbol, a warning. The chant swells. A whisper turns into thunder, distant but unstoppable, a promise, a curse. Tonight we unmask the dark meanings woven into Viking hair and why they mattered more than swords. A single braid lifts in the wind. The runes catch the fading light, then silence. The longhouse breathes smoke and shadow. Torchlight splinters off the rough timber beams, licking the haze as sparks drift upward into the rafters like restless spirits. The air is thick with fire, sweat, and silence. Freytis, the hairseer, crouches behind Bjorn, the berserker. Her face is streaked with charcoal, her eyes focused and unblinking. With fingers blackened by the same ash that stains her bowl, she parts Bjorn's tangled mane like a priestess preparing an altar. Her hands don't just move, they consecrate, painting something ancient into the warrior's scalp. Beyond the walls, a war horn tolls. Once, low and distant, the sound carries like a heartbeat, too slow, too final. She reaches for the carved commit's edge, blackened, its teeth worn smooth by ritual. She dips it into the bowl. Ashes, bare fat, power made tactile. The paste shimmers in the torchlight. It coats the comb like ritual paint, like war ink for the head. With deliberate strokes, she draws it through his hair. Each pull of the comb shapes him. The tangled mess becomes order. Chaos, captured, strands begin to rise into formation lines, echoing runes etched on stone, on bone, on fate itself. She braids spikes into a half-crown, binding each one with thread of wolf fur. The fur glints pale against the dark paste, each not a quiet invocation. Strength, savagery, hunger. This isn't a hairstyle, it's a transformation. A mask of myth. Bjorn's jaw locks, his eyes narrow, the torchlight catching their edges. He doesn't speak, but something beneath his skin seems to awaken. His breath shortens. The muscles in his back ripple. Then he rises. He towers in the doorway, hair spiked and crowned in war. Moonlight casts a jagged halo around his silhouette. As he steps into the courtyard, all voices fall to silence. Spectators freeze not in fear, but in reverence. Above, a raven caws. Harsh final. The night answers back with a gust of cold wind. Then darkness, the echo lingers. Hair, no longer decoration, now declares, I am ready for blood. They walk runways like they walk myth's braids, soaring like architecture, pastel strands twisted into alien geometry. But these are not warriors. These are models. Artists, icons. The light hits their hair like prophecy, but the meaning has faded. Elsewhere, a girl stares into a lens, her fingers braiding, separating, tightening. The glow of her ring light flickers as hearts and emojis float upward. "We're going Norse today," she says, smiling, inspired by some ancient vibes, but cute. 60% of her generation says hair is who they are, an identity, a signal. 10% reach further back, echoing the old styles, but few know what those styles once meant. Because once, braids were not beauty. They were code. They marked the warrior preparing for slaughter. They told who was wed, who was widowed. They revealed who had broken an oath and had their scalp carved as punishment. Once, to braid was to bind an oath, a fate, a death. A Viking stood beneath a low roof of smoke, oil darkening his hair. His braids were pulled tight not for fashion, but for fury. Each knot, laced with wolf fur, was a spell, a warning, a weapon. A bride wept softly as she wove her final braid. Oils soaked with herbs for fertility. The knot she tied would tell her gods and her husband who she was now. Their hair spoke when their mouths could not. Today, the language is quieter, softer. Hair is still power, but it's curated, filtered, lit from above. Modern strands shimmer with irony, or rebellion, or belonging, but rarely with fear. Now, it's pastel pink and crystal pins. Then, it was blood and braid tension. Law braided into scalp, magic twisted into living sigils. And yet, across centuries, fingers still move the same. Separate, twist, not reveal. Because, even now, hair remembers, and sometimes, it whispers. You think you're just styling, but in another age, you would have been swearing. Today, hair is fashion. Then it was fate, bound up with law, magic, and mortality. And some threads never break. Every Viking hairstyle, whether shaved temples or resin-stiff braids, served more than fashion. These styles encoded social rank, clan loyalty, and ancient power. Some even invoked curses, or sealed death pacts. In the lost scrolls of medieval Iceland, oaths weren't always spoken. They were braided. The Groggers tells of hair-bound promises, knots tied not for beauty, but for bond. Warriors marked their right to vengeance by carving odal runes into their scalps, blood mingling with meaning. If you wore the wrong braid, you risked exile, or worse. What rested on your head could place you under law, strip you of its protection. And beneath the bogs, archaeology whispers truths long buried, a skull unearthed with its scalp intact, faint markings carved into skin like forgotten scripture. Wooden combs, etched with runic patterns, still hold traces of meaning. Ancient strands, stiffened with resin mixtures, reveal more than preservation. They speak of ritual preparation, of readiness. These weren't casual choices. They were codified, intentional, frozen pacts, waiting to be read. In the shadow of the fire, Freitas murmurs over braidwork. Her fingers move in circles of power, resin glistening as she binds each knot. A whisper on every twist, a fate sealed with every pull. These were not decorations. They were declarations. Of luck, of vengeance, of sanctuary, of wrath. Living spells, woven into the scalp like prophecy, because to the Norse, hair was law. Hair was law. Hair was the loom of the living and the dead. And now, we follow the strand. In the chapters ahead, we'll trace the legal codes written in braids, the curses spoken in plaits, the secrets etched into ancient combs. We'll hear from scholars, rune readers, hair historians, unraveling a different knot in the thread. Join us as we untangle the braid of myth and meaning, one strand at a time. Beneath centuries of moss and silence, the bog gives up its dead. The body is curled, preserved in peat, face softened by time, but the hair endures. Along the scalp, a shaved ridge cuts clean through the crown, geometric, deliberate, not styled, but structured. This was not a whim of grooming. It was signal, statement, spell. The moss brushes the preserved flesh like breath, and what lingers on this head is not just Ajit's meaning. Bog bodies are not just corpses, they are time capsules. Their hairlines, frozen mid-sentence, whisper across centuries. These patterns weren't casual, they were ritual design, codes carved into living heads to speak through death. Behind museum glass, the combs rest. Delicate tines carved from antler, their surfaces worn smooth by use but etched still with meaning. Knots loop across their backs in intertwining runes. Some for luck, some for loyalty, some for warding. These were not merely tools for taming hair. These were symbols, portable shrines of identity. To pass a comb through one's hair was to redraw a rune on the body, to speak a quiet spell with every stroke. The braid and the comb echoed one another, each a structure of line and intention. They bound the wielder to clan, to creed, to fate. At the old thing, under the open sky, a man takes another's braid in his fist. Witnesses surround them, silent, solemn. The saga of Egil tells of this moment. A braid pulled, an oath spoken, and the gods listening. In Viking lore, hair wasn't ornament, it was witness. To grasp someone's braid before the law was to seal contract or curse. Words vanished, hair remained. A physical promise made of strand and skin and silence. In these moments, the head itself became a courtroom. The braid, a legal parchment, and to break the bond meant blood. Above the hearth, a knot is tied precise, deliberate, sacred. The saga speaks of Gestrit, that unwritten bond of shelter and safety, and of the knot, ritually braided over fire, that sealed the pact. Runes carved above the doorway echoed the meaning. The hair sealed it. If honored, peace was ensured. If broken, the knot turned curse. In the Viking world, hospitality was holy. But it wasn't granted with handshake or scroll, it was given by braid and symbol. Deviate from that code, and exile or death would follow. One head is shorn, short-trimmed, like a barley field. Another glows with layered braids, oiled and complex. Status spoke loudest, not from the mouth but from the scalp. A peasant wore his hair close-cut, functional. A jarl, by contrast, wove his story across his shoulders, each braid signaling his lineage, his victories, his authority. To mock a noble's hair was to mock the gods. To wear the wrong style in the wrong place was to invite scorn or punishment. In this world, the strands that crowned you could also condemn you. Some walked with shame marked not by chains but by stripes. Chronicles tell of debtors whose punishment was carved not in ledgers, but into their head. Vertical stripes, shaved into the scalp, known as barleycorn cuts, marked the bearer for all to see. There was no hiding. You walked through markets, through homes, through temples, with your failure etched into your head, a tax paid in humiliation. Hair became public record, a ledger that could not be erased. And each stripe was a debt that refused to stay silent. Beneath the threshold, a comb is found buried in silence, cradled by dust. Archaeologists uncover them again and again. Small, rune-etched combs, placed under doorways, hung near cradles, or hidden in hearths. They weren't lost. They were planted. Each comb was more than a tool, it was a ward. An apotropaic talisman, meant to protect, to bless, to shield. The strokes it had once made in hair were echoes of older spells, now cast to guard an entire home. What we discard today as mundane, they held sacred. Now, in sterile labs, the strands speak again. Under high magnification, a single Viking hair reveals rings of story cortisol marks from battle stress. Isotopic traces of diet, travel, famine. These aren't just hairs, they're maps. From root to tip, a human history is revealed. Each section, a memory. Braids, once symbols, now become data. Proof, evidence, lives written in keratin. Even in death, the Viking head speaks. Through science, through sagas, through strands, and in the glow of a digital render, the old combs return. Runes light up across a model braid. The hair glows like prophecy. We are reading what they always meant to leave behind. Not just stories, but spells. The sun rises as breath, rather than blaze faint and filtered through sea fog. Hearth smoke mixes with salt wind, curling over moss-slick stones. From the forge, hammer strikes ring like heartbeat. Phratis the hair-seer crouches near the fire pit, a carved comb in hand, yarrow-scented oil warming in a horn. Ingrid kneels before her, damp hair curling at the crown. Beside them, Bjorn watches silently, his eyes steel-bound and sleepless. The yard stirs with ritual and routine braiding, beside blacksmithing, fire beside frost. In this place, morning is not just beginning, it is being woven. The chieftain's yard woke in layered life hairwork, forging fate entwined in morning mist. Phratis begins the bridal braid, her fingers part Ingrid's hair with sacred precision, each twist echoing the pattern passed down from mothers before her. Silver threads glint between strands, and at the braid center, Phratis affixes a brooch, the same one worn by Ingrid's grandmother the day she was wed. A hush settles. The knot is finished. It glows in the firelight like a rune that only women read. This knot bound more than Herit-bound lineage, promise, and chieftain's vow. Bjorn steps forward, his hand steady, offering a strip of braided hide. Phratis threads it through Ingrid's braid, then seals it with a knot over flame. Her whisper is low, her chant older than the longhouse walls. Each pass of the braid draws protection into former, shield against wandering fate, against unseen eyes. Evening braiding became warcraft, trained to protect bride and clan alike. At high sun, the air is still. Bjorn kneels with 3 blood brothers. One by one, Phratis cuts the forelocks from their brows, snip clean, each drop of blood caught on cloth. The strands are braided, then woven into the belts at their waists. They do not flinch. They do not speak. They are now bound, not just in loyalty, but in hair, blood, and silence. This not-sealed blood-oath hair became living proof of loyalty and death code. Bjorn lifts the belt braid in his hand. It is heavier than hair should be. He touches each brother's braid where it binds to his own, and they meet, his gaze firm, wordless, unflinching. No vow is repeated. It doesn't need to be. Knots were contracts, hearts wired tight by shared strand. Leaf kneels in silence. He does not protest. He knows the sentence. Phratis takes the blade, her hand calm, but her breath tight. She begins at the crown, slicing stripe by stripe through his hair. The braid falls limp across his shoulder, severed from history. Each stripe is a boundary. Each pass erases belonging. Removing his braid, gutted identity, Leaf became a man of the woods, cast aside in public shame. Now, half-shaven, Leaf rises. His scalp bears the shame-bald lines carved like warning signs. Around him, the clan turns their gaze. Some look down, others look through him. He is a man no longer called by name. That shaved stamp was a living, brand-visible disgrace, harder to shake than rust. The forge breathes fire now, hot and loud. Bjorn returns. Phratis stands behind him, a pot of resin over flame. She dips her fingers in, then presses it through his hair, smoothing each spike upward. Ash mixes in, darkening the braid, hardening it. Her voice becomes chant. The braid crackles as the resin cools. Each coating hardened, the bond hair became helm. Braid became curse shield. Bjorn raises his arms. The others begin to chant an ancient helmet song, thick with ash and breath. The spikes in his braid rise like claws. Resin strains and glistens. The chant grows. The hall vibrates. Chant and crown fused braid into battlefield armor sound. Structure, psyche as one. The hall is full. Ale spills. Roasted meat cracks beneath bone. Yet all eyes drift to the braid resin-clad, centered under torchlight. Bjorn bows his head, and the room goes quieter still. Around him, men nod, women murmur, that braid isn't a boast, it's a beacon. Hair command, summoned, fear crowd shaped by strand. By firelight, Phratis warms oil in a shell bullgoat fat mixed with yarrow, thyme, and pine. She massages it through braid and scalp, sealing the warrior's work with softness. Then, a final knot of wool fur is tied near the base for insulation, and for luck, protection was nightly ritual hair, not left to fate. Bjorn lies under furs, breath even. The room is hushed, but Phratis stays awake. She ties a final strand thin, careful above his sleeping head, wrapping it through a loop carved into the hearthbeam. A dream-binding knot, old as the gods. The embers breathe smoke across his braid. The runes rest. Even sleep was guarded dreams stitched into strands, fate woven in night. Outside, the moon climbs. Bjorn stands alone, outlined by torchlight and stone. His braid arcs back over his head like a chlorescent stiff, glistening, a crest of bone and fate. He does not speak. He does not need to. The raven calls once in the dark. The wind answers. In that silhouette lay promise of fury braids, bound for battle, identity, destiny. The moon slides higher. The braid does not move, and somewhere in the night, a chant continues, soft, low, and eternal. A strand pulled tight across time. They marched in rhythm, shields tight, hearts steadied, but it wasn't only steel that bound them. Their braids, each tied in mirrored geometry, snapped with every step like signals. From behind, a shield wall became a single creature braid-linked, hair was both armor and altar. It aligned minds before blades clashed, forged unity before blood was spilled. Uniform braiding erased the question of loyalty. In battle, you didn't need to ask who stood beside you. One glance at the braid told you, your kin, your fate, your wall. What held them together wasn't just fear or training. It was trust, braided tight. He passed through the village square in silence. Shaved stripes, barleycorn lines cut down his scalp, each one louder than any spoken accusation. No axe, no prison, just haircut, not for style, but for sentence. The whispers followed him. So did the eyes. These weren't decorative patterns. They were declarations. Debtor, oathbreaker, man unfit for fire or feast. In Viking society, hair was currency. To lose it publicly was to lose place, honor, and identity. There was no cloak long enough to hide a branded head. They left a single tuft atop his shaved head. A crown of shame. This wasn't injury, it was intention. A partial tonsure carved for all to see. Penitence not in speech or stone, but scalp. The onlookers needed no explanation. That tuft told them everything. He had transgressed. He bore the cut. Ostracism didn't begin with exile. It began with the razor. Hair became his sentence, and his sentence walked with him. The guilt wasn't just known, it was seen. At the grave's edge, her hands didn't tremble. She opened a pouch, small worn, and drew out a single lock of hair. Not hers, not anymore. It belonged to memory. Beside the body, she placed scissors and a comb. And then, gently, the braid. Hair wasn't burned or buried casually. It was offering, bridge, last message. To the Norse, death was a departure, not a deletion. Hair clipped and buried marked the soul's trail, part map, part prayer. The living cut, the dead received. Life's rune, sealed in flesh, travelling onward. Freitas examined the braid like a scholar reads a scroll. Each knot sat in its place, not for beauty, but for memory. This one for courage. That one for safe childbirth. A third, laced tighter, for vengeance unspoken. Hair wasn't only hair. It was archive, codex, charm. In battle, a warrior might reach back, fingers grazing a knot, and recall the spell twisted within it. They remembered not with books, but with braids. Living spells, worn with purpose. He stood barefoot in morning frost, armor still strapped loose. But his braid was ready. It swayed with his breath, tension coiled inside. Not just design, but defense. A ritual helmet wrapped in skin and intent. The braid had been twisted for this moment. To steel his nerves. To hold his grief. To push doubt back across the line. Steel defends the body. Hair defends the will. In that plaited strand was resolve stronger than any blade. Her hands moved with rhythm. Not hurried, not idle. A sacred pace. Freitas braided the child's hair with slow certainty, her lips murmuring a chant known only to the hands of women. The child's eyes softened. The world shrank into touch and warmth. This wasn't just grooming. It was grounding. Each loop of braid quieted the mind. Each knot sealed attention. As psychologist Dr. Ingrid says, braiding was mindfulness, ritual focus, binding thought and fate. The braid wasn't just a shape. It was a moment, a lesson, a gift. The camera lingers on braids tightened for war, on stripes shaved in shame, on a hand placing hair beside a grave. Patterns emerge. Runes repeat. The scalp becomes a scroll. The comb, a wand. Their hair wasn't casual. It wasn't cosmetic. It was memory. It was law. It was spell. Each braid carried history. Each cut carried verdict. Each knot carried intention. Hair was their altar, their shield, their signature. Magic did not float above their lives, it wove straight through them. Strand by strand, a child sits still, hands folded in silence. Her braid is freshly tied, not in her clan's pattern, but in the colors of a rival chieftain. The threads are dyed crimson and ochre, clasped with an iron brooch. Nearby, the victor nods. Not in cruelty, but in control. Hostage children wore braided proof of submission. Their hair became tribute, not coin, not livestock, but lineage offered and bound. One braid cut, one lock redirected, and bloodlines bent. It wasn't fashion, it was fidelity. And every twist of fiber was political tethering, allegiance, sealed at the scalp. He does not resist. The oathbreaker is led to the bench. The crowd murmurs as the blade is drawn. Hair falls away in uneven clumps, revealing pale scalp beneath flickering torchlight. Partial tonsure marked a sinner, living warning. Full tonsure was rarer, reserved for the broken, the shamed, the penitent. It didn't just humiliate, it erased. Without hair, you lost name, you lost story, you lost place. The bowl fills with shorn strands. The silence thickens. Judgment complete. The Gogi surveys the rose warriors, lined and proud. Each man bears the same braid. Tight, left twisted, bound with pine thread, a visual oath. Control over hair meant control over optics, over memory, over morale. When every warrior wore the same braid, they moved not as men but as one. To deviate was defiance. To match was obedience. In a time with no uniform, hair became banner-worn not above the head but on it. The chamber is dim, flickering with fire and breath. Phratis whispers to a bowl carved with runes. In her hand a braid, not her own. A captive's. She winds it slowly around the bowl's rim. One knot, then another, then a third, sealed with ash and spit. Hair was sorcery's filament. To braid was to bind. To bind was to change. Spells of love, of fear, of ruin. Each one tied through hair, hidden where only the seer could sense. Even in silence, the braid screamed. In a quiet corner, a grandmother combs her hair, slow and reverent. She cuts a lock not too long, not too thick, and wraps it gently in cloth. Later, she weaves it into a braid chain that will hang above her newborn grandchild's cradle. This is legacy, tactile, intimate, alive. First hair was never discarded. It was preserved, interlaced with elder strands, lineage braided into proof. Before words, before names, hair said, "You belong." In the assembly hall, firelight dances across the faces of the clan. The chief steps forward. One hand reaches toward a warrior's braid. There's hesitation but no protest. He unbraids it knot by knot, motion by motion. The room stills. To lose a braid was to lose a name. It revoked honor. It untied identity. This was no physical blow, but the man would feel it all the same. Strand by strand, he was unmade. The comb is passed between elders. Its antler frame is smooth, but its teeth are etched runic lines that burn beneath the thumb. A woman sits before them. Her hair is brushed, not styled, but red. The comb glides slowly, searching for signs. Before verdicts, they judged the scalp. Before oaths, they combed for clarity. These were not just grooming tools. They were litmus for truth. Brushes of the soul. The hair did not lie. A final procession. One man's braid is cut in exile. Another's is burned over an altar. A child's lock is added to a woven chain. Braids tied around swords. Strands hung over altars. Runes whispering through combs. Hair was the fiber of order binding tribe to clan, power to prophecy. To braid was to bind. To cut was to curse. To hide was to fear. To show was to declare. And every lock held law. In the Norse world, power wasn't always loud. Sometimes it curled softly behind the ear. Sometimes it whipped like a banner in the wind. Sometimes it rested, sleeping on a newborn's brow. But always it was bound in hair. Even silence had texture, and it twisted, looped, and shimmered through every sacred strand. A ring light hums in the studio. A young man turns his head slightly, chin up. His undercut is sharp, clean faded, tight into a top knot, sleek, intentional, controlled. We brand ourselves with undercuts and fades, our own rituals of identity. Are we so different from Viking braid pledges? What once marked oath and tribe now signals confidence, ambition, rank. In boardrooms, as in battle lines, hair still speaks before the mouth does. It still says, "I belong." A mohawk slices the skyline above leather studs. Across the street, braids glint under a hoodie's edge. A man with tattooed scalp and top knot scans the sidewalk with the calm of one who claimed his place. Subcultures still use hair as tribal mark. From punk to hip-hop to skinhead to K-pop, these styles are banners of belonging. Just like Viking warriors once twisted their beards into loyalty knots, we too declare our alliances, loud, proud, and follicular. What we grow to be seen. The barber shop is alive, buzzers hum, clippers clack. Steam curls from a mug of coffee passed hand to hand. This is no salon, it's a hearth. Here, men lean in. Stories are traded. Advice is given. Jokes mask truth. It echoes the Norse longhouse, where braids were bound and bonds were made. The haircut isn't just a cut, it's a conversation, a confession, a subtle ceremony of transformation, public and private, all at once. The razor passes fast. A line of recruits shuffles forward, each head stripped to conformity. In another building, inmates sit still as hair falls away, silent under authority's gaze. Punitive cuts still speak the language of control. To shear the head is to shear the will. Whether in the name of discipline, rehabilitation, or uniformity, hair becomes the price of re-entry into structure. The scalp, exposed, becomes canvas for order. On a stage, a model spins. Her braid whips like a banner in a bridal suite. Hands tie silk through hair laced in tradition. On a rehearsal floor, dancers align their ponytails as precisely as their choreography. We still braid for ceremony. The performance may be different, but the purpose remains. Consecration, transformation, visibility. Hair rituals still bind the sacred to the social. They tell us who we are becoming when we step into commitment, into spotlight, into the story. A phone screen glows. Swipe, a braid tutorial. Tap, a transformation reel. Zoom, neon streaks, twisted tight and tagged with #warriorbraid. Hair is no longer just local, it's viral. Social media combs through identity like a digital longhouse. Followers become tribe. Style becomes signal. And hair, again, becomes the fastest way to say who we are without a word. Even online, the braid binds. Dr. Emma Clark, sociologist, our hair still signals power, belonging, even moral judgment. Dr. Navin Patel nods. He studies how hairstyles affect self-perception, confidence, acceptance. A changed cut often means a changed self. Whether on a therapist's couch or a red carpet, hair has meaning. It marks identity and signals inclusion or exclusion. This isn't vanity. It's survival. It's declaration. It's armor, braid, undercut, rainbow dreadlock. One after the other, they shift across the screen, linked by nothing and everything. The forms may change, but the message doesn't. Hair has always been a mirror of the moment, reflecting rebellion, devotion, heritage, transition. It is a thread through time. A Viking warrior tightens his braid before battle. A corporate exec smooths his undercut before a pitch. An inmate lowers his eyes beneath a freshly shorn scalp. Hair is continuity. Hair is code. From medieval oath braids to TikTok tutorials. From exile shaves to bridal crowns. From warriors' ashlocks to synthetic rainbows. Hair remains our most visible language. We style what we say. It holds our power. It exposes our shame. It anchors our rituals. It translates our silence. The runes may have faded, but the message never left. Hair is still fate in fiber, and we are still writing. The light returns softly, as it did before. Dawn drips through the slats of the longhouse, golden and slow. Phratis sits once more at her table, her combs lined like relics worn, sacred, waiting. Braids from the night before uncoil in the hush, relaxing back into themselves. From warrior crowns to bridal knots, from exile shaves to magic-charged manis, Viking hairstyles were more than hair. They were messages, spells, lifelines braided through time. A child kneels at her feet. Phratis fluffs the braid. She's just tides, simple, careful, firm. She doesn't speak. The blessing is understood. Half a world away, a modern stylist snaps a mirror closed. A fresh cut gleams under clean light. No spells, no chants. And yet, something old lingers in the gesture. We still braid our stories in hair. And perhaps the darkest meanings lie not in the strands, but in the hands that weave them. So we ask, what story does your hair tell? What power do you carry in every strand? A final frame. One comb rests on a rune-carved bench, silent, still, enduring. A quiet testament to the ancient art of hair.